Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, should the NFL adopt a draft lottery system similar to what the NBA does? Well, we'll talk about that, plus news and notes and calls and texts, all coming up on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, May 18th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it drops. And of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, many thanks to my man Ari. Does a great job each and every day making sure we're up on YouTube. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can check me out on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254 if you want to chime in on the show, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, or you can hit me up on Twitter again, at your boy Q254. Lots to get to on today's show. First of all, props to you, Raider Nation. Got a lot of good feedback off the Mirren Fader interview that I had on Wednesday's show, talking about Devontae Adams, the piece that she put in the Ringer. I thought it was really good. I thought that interview was really good. So that was welcomed with some real good positivity. So I thought that was good, and glad to see that a lot of Raider Nation really appreciated that interview. But today's another day, so let's go ahead and jump into news and notes here in segment number one. Segment number two, we'll talk about the potential of an NFL draft lottery, similar to what we saw from the NBA, and then calls and texts will close out the show in segment number three. News and notes, we'll start off with the Raiders announcing 4 additions to the coaching staff for the team's 2023 mandatory minicamp and training camp as part of the NFL's Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship Program. So what's that, you're asking? Well, it's designed as a vocational tool to increase the number of full-time NFL minority coaches. All 32 teams participate each year. The program's objective is to use NFL clubs' off-season workout programs and minicamps to give talented coaches opportunities to observe, participate, gain experience, and ultimately gain a full-time NFL coaching position. So it's just another effort from the NFL to try to put minority coaches in better positions to end up with full-time jobs. So this one's called the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship Program. The 4 coaches that are being added to the Raiders coaching staff for the minicamp and training camp: Coach Torrey Gill, he's on the offensive side of things. Coach Jamie Sharper on the defensive side of things. Coach Troy Vincent Jr., also defensively, and Coach Matt Willis on the special team side of things. Quick background on these guys, and I'm checking out the email that the Raiders sent out about it. Gill is entering his second season as an offensive graduate assistant with Oregon State after previously coaching 2 seasons at New Mexico State. Sharper finished his first season special teams coordinator, linebackers coach for the XFL DC Defenders in 2022. Before that, he was a linebackers and defensive line coach for Division I Georgetown for 2018-2022. And, of course, he was a member of the Super Bowl champion Ravens in 2000, led the NFL in total tackles in 2003, native of Richmond, Virginia, played collegiately at the University of Richmond, and left as the program's all-time leading tackler. Troy Vincent Jr., I know you know that name, right? Son of NFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations Troy Vincent, but he enters his first season as Director of Recruiting, Scouting, Analyst at Central Carrollton High School in Georgia in 2023. Previously served as Defensive Pass Game Coordinator at Paulding County, Georgia High School from 2021 to 2022. And then Willis played wide receiver for 7 years in the NFL for the Ravens, Broncos, Lions. Also played 2 seasons at UCLA after originally competing on the track and field team. Took part in the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship Program in 2017 and 2018 with the Chicago Bears. So those are the 4 coaches right there that will be part of the Raiders coaching staff for the minicamp and training camp: Torrey Gill, Jamie Sharper, Troy Vincent Jr., Matt Willis. Now, it's funny, that was announced the same day that the NFL announced the Coaching Accelerator participants. And this is just another program that is for minorities. They're actually going to be doing this Coach Accelerator program May 21st and 23rd at the Spring League meetings in Minneapolis. 40 coaches on this list. Nobody was representing the Raiders. And basically what it is, the 40 participants this year are attending based on their high potential to be considered for a head coach position in the future. 16 of the participants will be returning from the May 2022 Accelerator program. Well, that makes all the sense in the world why there's no Raiders participants, because a guy in Patrick Graham, who's the defensive coordinator for the Raiders, who is a guy that I've talked about even when he got hired by Coach McDaniels. I said, hey, this is a guy that has been on the short list of head coaching positions. He probably will be a head coach sooner rather than later. And then, well, he didn't do very well as a defensive coordinator his first year with the Silver and Black, and he got no interest in this hiring season as far as people interviewing him to be a potential head coach. Now, he did get that opportunity at the Senior Bowl, but Patrick Graham has got to work his way up to show that he can be a defensive coordinator in this league for the long term. Like, he's got to do a lot of work with this Raiders defense just to show he can be that guy, let alone a head coach. So it makes a lot of sense why he's not there, but Terrell Austin is there representing the Steelers, Chris Beatty from the Chargers, Marcus Brady from the Eagles, Callie Brownson from the Browns, Mike Caldwell from the Jaguars, DeMarcus Covington from the Patriots, Ronald Curry, you're familiar with him, with the Saints, Matt Daniels with the Vikings, Sean Desai with the Eagles, Tony Dews with the Titans, Aiden Durdew with the Cowboys, John Embry with the Dolphins, Leslie Frazier, he's been a longtime coach in the league, Jerry Gray with the Falcons, Pep Hamilton, longtime coach, Richard Hightower with the Bears, Frisman Jackson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I actually knew Frisman Jackson when he was a coach on the Baylor staff. Brian Johnson with the Eagles, Gerard Johnson with the Texans, Randy Jordan, you're very familiar with him, with the Commanders, Kerry Joseph with the Seahawks, Cato June with the Colts, Thaddeus Lewis with the Buccaneers, Charles London with the Titans, Anthony Lynn was once the Chargers head coach with the Vikings. Keenan McCardell with the Vikings. Thomas McGahee with the Giants. Dave Moret with the Chiefs. Scotty Montgomery with the Lions. Jeff Nixon, he was also on that Baylor staff with Matt Rule with the Giants. Tony Oden with the Jets. Christian Parker with the Broncos. Aubrey Pleasant with the Rams. Chris Richard doesn't even have a team right now, but he's a guy that's been considered multiple times and has taken multiple visits and interviewed multiple times for a head coaching position. Kelly Skipper with the Bills. Willie Taggart, remember Willie Taggart with the Baltimore Ravens, Drew Terrell with the Arizona Cardinals, Troy Walters with the Bengals, Joe Witt Jr. with the Cowboys, and Greg Williams with the Green Bay Packers. So those are the 40 names right there. Again, no Raiders representation, but again, because they're looking at guys that should be considered or could be potentially considered for head coaches across the league, it makes sense why there's nobody representing the Silver and Black. Finally, here in segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, news and notes of the day. I know a lot of people probably won't even want me talking about this, but former Raider Damon Arnett was indicted. He was indicted for assault with a deadly weapon and firearm-related charges. Of course, he was a first-round pick in 2020. He's been released from the team for a long time because he was on the internet acting a fool. Since he's been released from the Raiders, he was part of the Dolphins practice squad. He signed a future contract with the Chiefs, and the Chiefs cut him a week after signing him after he had that crazy event in Las Vegas where basically he couldn't find his valet ticket parking at a hotel, and the staff asked him for another form of proof that he owned the car, and he responded by producing a gun and taking away the keys. And he just doesn't make a whole lot of sense with what Damon Arnett does. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is not because he's a former Raider, this, that, and the other. And, I just want to bring up some news that's negative and has the Raiders' name involved in it. No, I just hope that Damon Arnett finds a way to get his stuff together. Right? I mean, he's one of these guys that doesn't matter that he's not in the league right now. It just matters that he gets his life together. He is one of those dudes that I could see waking up one morning and reading something bad about just because he seems like a knucklehead that just can't get out of his own way. And so anyone who's listened to this show for a long time, I know some people will tell me stick to sports, stick to the Raiders or current Raiders. I don't care. He's not a Raider no more. I get that. But I also care about people's lives. And so if that's not for you, that's okay. I respect that. You can fast forward this part. But I just I want to look out and hope somebody's looking out for Damon Arnett because, man, that dude is a menace to his own self. And I'm hoping that somebody is in his corner and says, hey, dude, you need to calm it on down just so you have a better life. Not worried about football. I'm just worried about him off the field as just a bad dude that, well, gets into trouble. And hopefully someone, like I said, pulls him to the side, calms him down, and gets him, fixated back on life and doing the right thing. And hopefully that's what happens. But that was the latest on Damon Arnett, indicted for assault with a deadly weapon and firearm-related charges. It's funny that event, actually, the prosecutors had dropped the charges at one point without any kind of explanation, and then the grand jury decided to charge Arnett again. So just doesn't seem like things are going too good for that dude, but it's all self-inflicted. And like I said, only thing I can do is hope that he finds the help that he needs to stay out of trouble. But that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, should the NFL have a draft lottery similar to the NBA? This is an idea that I saw floated out there by my guy Justin Mello from the Draft Network. Read his article, had him on my radio show on Wednesday, and really didn't deep dive into it like I wanted to on the radio show, so I want to deep dive into it, and we'll do that next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast after I tell you about Built Bar. And I check out the website, built.com, all the time, and there is something for everyone. You can get the Built Bar Puff cookie dough chunk or Built Bar Puff birthday cake. How about Built Bar coconut brownie strip? There's something for anyone. I told you before, I'm a big-time peanut butter guy, so there's all kind of different options when it comes to peanut butter, but they have other limited-time flavors. Red Velvet Puff. They have the cookie dough chunk puff. They have the chocolate coconut granola, brownie batter puff bite. I mean, there's so many different flavors, so many different options. You can get marshmallows, you can get granola, you can get straight up chocolate bar, whatever the case may be, whatever fits your narrative, they got it for you. Very low in calories, very low in sugar, high in protein, and high in taste. So check it out today, built.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON15. You'll save 15% off your order when you go to checkout. Again, built.com, promo code LOCKEDON15. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into an idea and a concept that I saw, and I've seen multiple people and multiple radio hosts kind of talk about this on Wednesday following the NBA's draft. But should the NFL think about doing a draft lottery? Right? I mean, the NBA did that on Tuesday night, and San Antonio Spurs, they won the right to get the number 1 overall pick, and so they have an opportunity to go get a generational talent in Victor Wembanyama, and that dude could be the next greatest thing. He's supposed to be the next greatest thing since LeBron James. Maybe he lives up to that hype, maybe he doesn't, but with all the hype, all the excitement, I saw different fan bases gathering at bars and having big old watch parties. And, you know, when the Spurs found out they got the number 1 overall pick, it just place erupted and people went crazy. The fan base was super pumped up. It made a lot of people think, should the NFL do that? Should the NFL adopt that same concept? So when they come up with the draft order, it's not just based off of wins and losses and, oh, okay, well, the Texans lost so many games or the Bears lost so many games, they're going to automatically get the number 1 overall pick. But should they do a percentage? Should they do similar to what the Houston Rockets, the San Antonio Spurs, and I believe the Detroit Pistons all had a 14% chance at getting the number 1 overall pick, and again, San Antonio ends up coming away with that? Should they do it like that? So if you look at what the Raiders had this year, they had the number 7 overall pick. So maybe they have I don't know what the percentage would be. I'm just throwing something out there. Maybe a 4% chance of getting that number 1 spot. But it gives you a chance. Would that make things a little bit more exciting? Would the NFL want to do something like that? Would it prevent teams from, I don't want to say tanking, because I don't believe that teams, like the players on the field, I don't believe that they tank. I don't believe that they try not to win. But I do believe that franchises and front offices might not give them every tool that they need to win. You know what I mean? So would that slow that down? Would that slow that down from teams being okay with not doing so well in the regular season? Or would they find another way to kind of finagle it and put themselves in better position to go, like we heard, suck for luck, tank for Tua, right? I don't know what the saying is this year for Caleb Williams or Drake May, but there's always some catchy phrase. And my guy Justin Mello from the Draft Network, he actually had an article that he put out on the draftnetwork.com. He did a really good job with it, and I had him on my radio show to talk about it, and he was very fired up and passionate about the NFL doing it. And he said it's too late for the NFL to do it for 2024, but could you imagine that the way that the NFL sets up a 3-hour show just for the schedule release, and how they're able to create enough revenue and make that something that NFL fans get super pumped up about? I mean, hell, once the schedule release dropped, how many days did we talk about the schedule here on the show? Right, we talked about it multiple days leading up to the schedule release, talked about it multiple days after the schedule release. So his point was, if they could turn the schedule release, when you already know what teams that your team is going to be playing, you just don't know what the order is going to be. If they could turn that into a big monster event, couldn't they turn the draft lottery into a monster event? And so it made sense to me. I just wonder if fans in the NFL would be as excited as fans in the NBA, because obviously in the NBA, you can get a generational talent like a LeBron James or a Victor Wembanyama, and you can feel like, okay, the team is now going to be immediately turned around. This team is going to have an opportunity to win. You saw what LeBron did in Cleveland when he went there as an 18-year-old, right? He immediately turned the fortunes of that place around. So Victor Wembanyama is going to be expected to do the same thing now with the San Antonio Spurs. And by the way, the Spurs have won the lottery multiple times. Don't forget about Tim Duncan, right? And look, I'm one of those guys. I'll be the first to tell you, I believe that the NBA has a little bit of funny business when it comes to that draft lottery. And so one of my questions I had asked Justin was, well, how would the NFL kind of police it so fans and others wouldn't accuse them of kind of doing some home cooking like they do in the NBA? And one thing he said was, well, Q, they're always going to be someone that's going to believe there's some kind of home cooking going on. There's some kind of conspiracy theory going on. But this last year, the NBA had a bunch of reporters that are beat writers, like a Vinny Bonsignor or Vic Tafer or a Tashawn Reed, didn't have their phones or anything, but they had them in the back and they saw the whole process so they could report on it later. Like, hey, everything went down smoothly, or hey, there was a little something fishy going on. So he said that that's how he thinks that the NFL could police it. But I have plenty of questions, but I do wonder if that would make it more interesting. So maybe 4 or 5 teams had similar records, or even like the top 10. I mean, you saw how the difference were between, the number 1 overall team, which was the Chicago Bears until they traded with the Carolina Panthers, to, the number 10 team, which was, again, the Carolina Panthers. There wasn't a whole big difference, right? And then it would stop. I know this. It would stop fans from getting mad when, a team wins a game at the end of the season. Oh, you should have lost that game because now you're going to lose ground in the draft. And I'm always for winning. Right. I'm always for, hey, win as many games as you can because, well, the fan base deserves to see you win as many games. But, you can go back with the Raiders in particular a few years ago when they won that game, in Denver, and they lost a little bit of ground as far as the draft order went, and they didn't get the chance to go and draft Nick Bosa. And many people said that was a bad decision by the Raiders to win that game because they would have been in position. They ultimately didn't. The 49ers ended up with Nick Bosa, and, well, we all know the rest is history. So, it would give incentive, I think, for these teams to keep trying to win because they still feel like they have an opportunity? Or would they just, we're going to lose anyway to give ourselves more of an opportunity, right? So, I mean, there's both sides of the argument I could definitely understand. But I did see, with that party, going back to San Antonio just on Tuesday night, with that party that they had and the way that their fan base was so fired up, I'm just trying to think, could there be a sports bar that I'm sitting in here in Las Vegas and broadcasting, doing a show live from, and all right, here comes the lottery balls, who's going to get it? And would that add a little bit more intrigue? And if it did, which I believe it would, I mean, look, think about the NFL and what they're doing with streaming. Right? I mean, they got a Black Friday game. They got a Thursday game on Amazon. They got a wild card game now on Peacock. Everything they're doing for money, I'm sure they could find a way to make that an exciting event and make a whole lot of money off of it, which, of course, is what all the NFL cares about. And I think it might be fun for the fan base to do. I just don't know if one player can change the fortunes of a team as quickly as a player can in the NBA. So I don't know if that would be as excited each and every year. Like, would everyone have been excited this year for the right to get the number 1 overall pick and go get Bryce Young, right? Or next year when it's Caleb Williams and Drake May, it feels like it's a little bit more exciting. Or when there was like Andrew Luck or Trevor Lawrence, like I can see those particular years being super exciting. Would a defensive player make that much more sense? Like when the Browns drafted Myles Garrett number 1 overall and they got the number 1 pick and they said there's no doubt they're going to go draft Myles Garrett because he's that guy. Would that get a fan base as excited as, winning the draft lottery like that? So those are some questions that I have, but I just thought it was a good conversation. I thought it was a really good piece. I do encourage you to go read it. It's on the Draft Network. Again, my guy, Justin Mello, does a fantastic job there on the Draft Network, is the one who wrote the article. So check it out. Give me your thoughts. 707-654-4693. Speaking of your thoughts, your calls and texts are coming up next in segment number 3 as we close out the show today here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start off with a call from Raider Mike in San Jose. He's calling to talk about Marcus Peters and what vibe he gets when he thinks of the Raiders signing him. Here he is, Raider Mike in the 408.
Hey, what's up, Q? This is Mike calling from San Jose, and I just wanted to chime in a little bit on, we were talking about Marcus Peters and how he could potentially become a Raider and how we need that difference maker in the secondary, someone who has the ball skills and who can make plays, try and get some turnovers. And it's reminding me a lot, like almost uncanny, of when we went out and got Sean Smith and how he was supposed to be that ball hawk and, he was supposed to be that shutdown corner. And look what he turned out to be. This guy was getting burned play after play after play, and that's a little bit what I think Marcus Peters he's going to turn out to be. So let me hear your thoughts on that one. All right, Mike out.
Raider Mike, thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And it's so funny you bring up Sean Smith. I remember that like it was yesterday. I remember sitting there. I was in Texas still. I was sitting there refreshing Twitter, refreshing Twitter, like every few seconds, waiting to see the news if the Raiders were landing Sean Smith. And I forget who the free agent cornerback that was also out there available at that time. And I remember whoever it was, I think was better than Sean Smith, but he went to another team for more money. And it was like, all right, well, the next best option is Sean Smith. And the Raiders turned their attention to Sean Smith and eventually landed him. And you're right. Sean Smith wasn't worth a salt, right? He was getting burned a lot. The only difference I would say between Sean Smith and Marcus Peters has a longer history of being successful and getting ball production, right? I mean, he's done it his whole career. He's got his hands on the ball. He's frustrating. He's going to get burned at times, but he's going to make plays at times. You know, I had one suggestion on my radio show on Wednesday about how about you put Marcus Peters into the Rod Woodson, the Charles Woodson type role and make him a safety where he always has his eyes in the backfield. That's what he wants to do anyway. So take him off the corner, put him in the safety spot, and just try to tell him to go make plays. He's not going to be the guy that's going to be the most sure tackler. But if you're just asking a guy to go make some plays on the ball, that might be a role that he embraces at 30 years old and kind of preserves his career a little bit because, again, he is frustrating as a corner. He's going to get burned, but he's going to make some plays as well. But Raider Mike, thanks for the call. I do appreciate you, and thanks for the blast in the past when it comes to Sean Smith. Up next, got a text from Raider Nick in the 808. Q, what it do? It's Raider Nick texting out the 808. And, man, that was a really great interview with Miriam Fader and clearing up some of the misconceptions of her incredible piece on Devontae Adams. But at the end of the day, no one, and I repeat, no one, is going to drop the narrative that he is unhappy with the coaches of front office, and that's an unfortunate consequence of us wanting athletes to be truthful and themselves. Once he doesn't have a good game or shows any sort of frustration, just like last season, we're going to hear that he misses Rodgers or he misses Carr, BS, and have Jets, Saints, and Packers writers and the national media saying he wants out. Just going to be an unnecessary storyline for the rest of the year in the season. Much love, Q. That's Raider Nick in the 808. And, yeah, I believe that is going to be a narrative that you're going to hear quite a bit. And as I mentioned, man, on Tuesday I saw so many different outlets talking about, he wants out. He hasn't demanded a trade yet, but he wants out. And, see, that's why he went and put a picture up of him and Dave Ziegler to quiet down the noise. I know from a fact that he is happy with Dave Ziegler. He's good with Josh McDaniels. Does he want other things? Sure. Would he have liked Aaron Rodgers? Absolutely. Right? I mean, would he have liked the Raiders to go and maybe get one of those top quarterbacks that they were all looking at? Sure. Which they attempted to do, right? They tried to get to the number one spot. It just didn't work out. So I'm sure that there's things that he would prefer, but he's not unhappy like that. But you're right, Raider Nick. It's gonna be a narrative all the time. And the reason I say I know for a fact that he's good and he's not upset, his agent sent a text message to Vinny Bonsignore and said straight up, like, he's good. he's good. And the reason he put out that picture of him and Dave Ziegler was just because so many people were blowing him up, asking if he was upset and if he wanted out of Las Vegas with the Raiders. And so he was like, man, let me just go ahead and nip it in the butt. And that's what he did. And so there's that. But anyway, that's just a little bit of a background. But I did think that piece that Miriam wrote and the interview that she did on my radio show was fantastic. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it as well. Up next, got a call from Proto in 778. He's calling to talk about fourth-round pick Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue and shares his thoughts on him. Here he is, Proto in the 778.
Hey, yo, Q! It's your boy Proto from the 778. So, I've been doing some reading and some watching of Aiden O'Connell. Now, before I start saying what I'm about to say, here's a caveat. I'm not saying he's going to be a great quarterback. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he's the second coming of Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. I'm not saying that. However, I am saying if you watch his tapes, the man's got accuracy. That's one. Secondly, I know you're going to say he's not fast because mobile quarterbacks is what everybody wants in the NFL. But if you actually check his 40 time, he's faster than Mahomes. Mahomes ran a 4.840. He runs a 4.740. Even Jalen Hurts is fast, but Jalen Hurts ran a 4.5 something, right? So we're not talking about like Lamar Jackson or Anthony Richardson kind of fast. Most NFL quarterbacks that are really good aren't actually that fast. Like, okay, I get it. Lamar Jackson is fast, but Lamar Jackson hasn't honestly done a ton of winning outside of his first year. Plus, it's kind of always injured. That's kind of the other drawback of fast quarterbacks. They do tend to get injured more than regular pocket passing quarterback. But if you look at Aiden O'Connell in the pocket, I actually compare him more to like Peyton Manning. Again, I'm not saying he's the next Peyton Manning. I'm not saying that. But he does play quarterback like a mouse. And what I mean by that is, if you watch guys like Peyton Manning, they're not very mobile, but they're constantly moving in the pocket. They never stay still. They always look like people who are running away from a cat, just constantly scrambling around. And when it's time to take off, they do. But the other big thing is, when it's time to release the ball, they have a really quick release, which Hayden O'Connell does. Not only a quick release, but a really quick release that's pretty accurate. So we're talking about a quarterback that's very accurate, that's actually good in the pocket, and that's a really quick release, and he played on a really bad team. Again, I'm not saying crown him the next Peyton Manning, but I am saying it's got some major upsides that you might want to take a look at. That's what I got for you, Q. As always, Raiders.
Proto, thanks for the call, my man. And my thing with O'Connell, it's not about being fast at all. Like, you're right. Quarterbacks don't have to be fast. Mahomes isn't the fastest dude. There's a lot of quarterbacks that aren't the fastest dudes. My thing is he's got to be able to move the pocket. He's got to be able to keep a play alive, scramble just a little bit, not a whole lot, but if there's, green grass there, you got to go pick that up, right? He's not going to do that. Now, he can move just a little bit, but again, that's not what he wants to do. And, that was one of the storylines that we talked about with Derek Carr. Like, it was frustrating because he wouldn't run. He wouldn't go pick up those yards, and he was athletic enough to do it. So I just think that at some point the Raiders need to have a guy that can do that and move the pocket and all that. It's not really about speed. Mahomes ain't the fastest dude, but when push comes to shove, what's Mahomes doing? He's running around, he's moving the pocket, he's picking up big yards when necessary, and in the Super Bowl, some of the biggest plays were him running. Not him throwing, but him running. And so I just think that that's what you need to have. But to your credit, he's very accurate. I know for a fact he's sharp upstairs. Like, I've done my homework on him. It's not like I'm just looking at him like, oh, he can't play. I've done my homework. I know he's accurate. I know he's smart. He's overcome adversity. He's a guy that fits a mold that Josh McDaniels would like to try to mold him as a quarterback. I'm okay with that. That's fine. I just think personally he's going to be a backup. But if he turns into something else, even better. Then obviously the Raiders knew what they were doing, and then when they went and got him in the 4th round, it wasn't a reach. It was ended up the franchise quarterback for a long time for the Raiders. If that ends up happening, then it'll be a great story. But right now, it's just an opportunity for a young man in camp, and he'll make the best of it. But, I do know with his accuracy and his brains, again, having it upstairs, being able to figure things out and overcome the adversity he's overcame, I know that he's a guy that, Josh McDaniels would like to have an opportunity to coach up. I mean, this dude was a walk-on at Purdue. They put him at tight end at one point. He was so far down on the depth chart, like 9th. So, I mean, he's overcome a lot. He was a starter. Then the starting job was taken away, and then he earned it back. I mean, I can go on and on about Aiden O'Connell. I've done my homework, brother. So definitely appreciate the call. Up next, got a text from Brent from Boston. He said, hey, Q, it's Brent from Boston checking in. I got a question for you as the dust settles on this offseason. What does a statistically successful season look like for our top draft picks? I'm thinking that Wilson needs to get at least 7 sacks. Mayer needs to get 60-plus receptions and 5 touchdowns. Solid run defense and 3 sacks for Young would be acceptable. Assuming Bennett gets on the field, I can see him getting a couple picks. Appreciate your thoughts and keep up the good work. Just win, baby. That's Brent from Boston. And, woo, that's a lot of production, right? And that's the thing. I think those guys are capable of those kind of numbers. I just don't know if they're capable of those kind of numbers right away, right? I mean, like Tyree Wilson, think about Khalil Mack. As good as he was, he had 4 sacks his rookie year, right? I don't expect Tyree Wilson to go in there and have 7+ sacks. Now, I know Max Crosby had 10 sacks his rookie year, so it's not like it's impossible, but it's just tough. It's difficult. So I'm looking at, 4 or 5 sacks for Tyree Wilson, but you can see that he can play and it's not too big for him and he can play in multiple positions. I think that's really good for Tyree Wilson. Mayer, I don't really know what the numbers look like. I think he's going to be a big addition in the red zone. So maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns does make sense. He's going to be a really good blocker. I think you'll be able to tell how good Mayer is based off what the run game looks like as well, because he's going to be in there blocking. I mean, that's one of his really big deals that he can do. 60+ receptions, I don't know. That's a lot of receptions, right? Especially when you have Devontae Adams, you have Jacoby Myers, you have Hunter Renfrow, you know what I mean? Like that's a lot of catches, 60+ catches, and you have all those other guys as well. You have to assume that Devontae Adams, if healthy, is going to be right around 100. So that'd be, 160 between those two? You have to assume, and I know it's a lot of assumption, but if Hunter Renfro's healthy, assume that he's going to get 60+, right? Jacoby Myers, I'm assuming, if he's healthy, again, 50, 60+. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. So I don't really know the number of catches, but 4 or 5 touchdowns may be, right for Mayer because, again, I think he's going to help out a lot in the red zone. Young, I think stopping the run is going to be key for him, and I'd look at 2 or 3 sacks, right? At least a lot of pressures. May not complete the sack every time, but get some pressures, right? And then if you see guys like Chandler Jones and Max Crosby eating a little bit more, you look to see if Byron Young's on the field. If he is, I think that's also a good sign. As far as just like straight numbers, it's hard to do that. Jacorian Bennett, I think he's going to be good at some time, but I don't know when he's going to get on the field, as you mentioned. Chris Smith, same thing. I think he's going to be good. Just don't know when he's going to get on the field. So thank you so much for that text. I appreciate you. I got time for just a couple more. Quick call from Jordan in Oregon. He's calling to talk about the Devontae Adams piece in the Ringer and shares his thoughts on it. Here he is, Jordan in Oregon.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Jordan in Oregon. Hey, I appreciate you chiming in and throwing kind of your 2 cents in on the Devontae Adams Ringer piece, which I know you're getting blown up right now about all this. And so, if this message just hits your ears, that is definitely cool with me, man. And if it hits the pod, that's fine too. But bro, I just wanted to call and say thanks for the way that you broke it down on your radio show and your podcast and just being like real about it all. And I mean, honestly, the reason I really wanted to call in is just listening to your show. A friend of mine and I yesterday working together is like the best way to put it for me and sum it up as easy as I can is Devontae Adams is in the same battle all of us are in. It's a race against time and just trying to maximize your full potential. And it just got us thinking for a second. It's like, isn't that literally what we're all in this world is trying to maximize your full potential and really in considering in father time, the race with time, man. And, mid-30s myself and now closer to 40 than 30. And so it's like, I'm kind of in that spot too in my career where I feel like I'm at my prime and I want to maximize my full potential and be as successful as I can during the years that I know I can push it. And being a contractor and in this industry of what I'm in, it's a race against time, man, trying to build it up and make it work. And so I just want to throw and Q, you as well, man. Like, I know where you're at, and it's like, you're in that same, trying to maximize your full potential and with keeping father time and the race with time in mind. So peace out, bro.
Jordan, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, you hit it on the head, man. I mean, we're all racing against time, right? And that's why I take so much pride in my shows. Well, regardless if it's a radio podcast, if I'm doing an interview, whatever the case may be, like I don't ever want to be that guy. And it's one of my biggest fears in life. And it probably shouldn't be, but it is. But it's one of those things where I don't ever want someone to look back and be like, man, he wasted that opportunity, right? Like I talked about Damon Arnett in segment number 1. Like I look at him and say, man, what a wasted opportunity he had. He was a first round draft pick. Shouldn't have been a first round draft pick. And he didn't take advantage of it, right? And we can do that all the time. We can go back and look at so many guys that, have wasted opportunities. I look at people that I've worked with in the past and thought, man, they've had such opportunities and they just let it go. I don't ever want to be that guy. So you're right. It's a race against time. Do as much as you can while you still can, while they still want you to, right? Like people say, why do you do so many radio shows? Because they still want me to talk. There's going to be a time where they're going to be like, yeah, no thanks. Q was cool, but he ain't that cool, right? There'll be somebody some years down the line that'll be doing this show, and everybody's like, man, remember that last guy? He stunk. He was bad. This dude's awesome, right? I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. That's how it is. So right now, I got to take advantage and do what I do until I'm told otherwise or, circumstances change. But yeah, I mean, everyone has a limited window, man. That window, it's not getting bigger. Like Rachel Barbeau. I don't know if I put the interview on the podcast, but I talked to her, and she's like a motivational speaker. I talked to her at the Super Bowl this past year, and she said something that really I'll never forget it. She said, Q, we're all walking each other home. Like every day we wake up, we're walking each other home. Like we're not getting any younger. We're not, we're not gaining time. We're every day that we're alive and doing anything we're doing, we're literally walking each other home. So that's just one of those things. So Devontae Adams saying that he wants to do more and more and more, and it's a race against time with what he's doing on the football field. That should go for everybody in the league. It doesn't. A lot of people just think that they'll be there forever, and then all of a sudden they wake up and they realize they can't do it anymore, and they wonder what the hell happened. At least he's understanding what's going on and realizes that he has less time than he had 5 years ago, right? I mean, he's not a rookie anymore. He's been in the league a long time. You know, the window's closing as opposed to the window getting bigger. But thank you so much. I think you hit it right on the head. Great call, great breakdown. We'll close things out with a text from Drunk DMN Raider. So I'm thinking Drunk Demon Raider, maybe. He says, I get people are concerned about Jimmy G's health, as am I, but people really need to look at the fact that 49ers have a history the last decade of not keeping their quarterbacks and running backs healthy. I mean, they practically lose a running back to injury almost every game for how many years now? They lost every quarterback last year, and the only reason Jimmy has been the starter is because they couldn't keep the planned starter healthy. Jimmy G is definitely part of the issue, but the 49ers system hasn't helped him out either as far as health goes. That's Drunken Demon Raider. And yeah, thank you for that text. I appreciate you. And I've said that a few times on the show. I had a really good conversation with Paul Gutierrez from ESPN. We had it at the stadium one time at Allegiant Stadium. We had it on the radio show multiple times that Kyle Shanahan's quarterbacks always get injured. And I do believe that that's part of the element of the problem that's been Jimmy G and his injury health. But remember, he got injured back in New England as well when he got an opportunity with the Patriots. So unfortunately for him, he does get injured, but you're spot on when it comes to 49er quarterbacks all getting injured. They lost every single one of them last year. Like, hell, if I had suited up for the 49ers, I would have got injured. And I wouldn't even been on the field. But somehow, just putting on the uniform, I probably would have got injured as well. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Thanks so much for everyone in the calls, the feedback, Twitter, whatever the case may be, at your boy Q254. If you're hitting up Ari, at Ari Produces on Twitter, we definitely appreciate that. And, of course, you can always call and chime in at 707-654-4693. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more calls and texts. We'll close things out strong. We'll have news and notes, and, of course, we'll have strong conversation as we do. Again, closing out the week really strong, heading into the weekend. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.